Right, good evening everybody to this evening's Scrutiny meeting on Economy, Environment and Place Committee. This is being broadcast live on YouTube and will be recorded for future publish. We have 11 items on the agenda tonight, but only 3 substantive ones. So I'll start with item 1, which is apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor Heesom, who is being substituted by Councillor Parker, but Councillor Parker will be joining slightly late. Are there any other apologies, please? No, I'm not seeing any, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in any items on the agenda, please? No, thank you. So item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which are found on pages 3 to 10 of your pack. And this was the meeting that was held on the 17th of December. Does anybody have any alterations, suggestions, first of all? No, so can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Rose, we take it, Chair.
Moved by Councillor Panther, seconded by Councillor Crocott. All those in favour, please?
Say aye.
Aye. Yeah, that's unanimous, thank you. Item 4 is an update from Cabinet. It says on my report that there's nothing to update on. Is that correct from any Cabinet members? There's nothing you wish to update?
No.
Okay. Right, so we'll move on to the first substantive item, which is item 5, Sustainable Environment Strategy. This is on pages 11 to 36. It's going to be introduced by Councillor Johnson, and then Mr. Adams, our officer, is going to take us through the main element. So, Councillor Johnson.
Okay. Good evening to all the members and officers. Over the last 2 years, the country has been focusing on the sustainability agenda and the environmental threats caused by rising carbon emissions, habitat loss, plastic pollution, and poor use of dwindling natural resources. This has resulted in councils around the UK and governments around the world responding to these threats. The public are calling for rapid and robust reduction and mitigation measures. In April 2019, this council passed a climate emergency motion. An essential element of this was the aim of becoming carbon neutral with respect to the council's own estates and activities and those relating to our residents and businesses as soon as practically possible. The Borough has historically had a strong commitment to biodiversity and energy efficiency. In 2007, the council was a participant in the Staffordshire Climate Change Partnership and Climate Change Adaptation Group. Last December, I recommended to the Cabinet a sustainable environmental strategy for the council and the Borough, and this was unanimously welcomed and agreed by Cabinet. The strategy is on your agenda this evening, and I would now ask Dave Adams to brief us on this strategy and will welcome any members' views and ultimate support for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Over to you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. By way of background, as Councillor Johnson just mentioned, last December, Cabinet considered a report on a sustainable environmental strategy and action plan for the council and for the borough. In recommending that strategy to Cabinet, Councillor Johnson also referred to the council's motion and resolution in 2019 declaring a climate emergency and the commitment of Cabinet to deliver a sustainable environment strategy. Cabinet subsequently approved the strategy and action plan and resolved to seek views and support for the strategy and action plan from key partners and from the Economy, Environment and Place Scrutiny Committee, hence the item on your agenda this evening. Turning to the strategy itself, underpinning the changes it seeks to make is a commitment that Newcastle-under-Lyme is dedicated to ensuring a sustainable future that leads to improvements within our communities and will continue to strive to reduce our own impact on the environment in everything that we do. The strategy document identifies 4 priority outcomes which flow into the action plan in terms of how these aims will be delivered. And these 4 priority outcomes are to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, to reduce carbon emissions, to minimise waste and increase recycling, and to offset remaining carbon emissions. The strategy, in effect, outlines the first phase of the Council's commitments and sets a future direction of travel, but is by no means the end of the work that's needed. In reality, it is recognised that this is only the start of the journey and that further ongoing work is required to develop the optimum range of activities in the action plan on a flexible basis. The strategy also makes it clear that to improve the local environment and mitigate the effects of climate change in all its facets, it will require changing the way we do things, looking into our own services and ways of working, as well as encouraging, supporting and inspiring others to do the same. That said, we're not starting from a zero base, quite from it. The section of the strategy titled Our Current Commitment details quite a wide range of actions, activities and initiatives that all make a positive contribution towards achieving the aims in theme areas. And those theme areas that the strategy is proposing are recycling, waste and resource management, travel and transport, the built environment, energy and renewables, the natural environment, and awareness, engagement, and behavioural change. Looking to the future, the strategy contains an action plan which sets out a range of actions which cover the next 5 years. The main focus are actions which relate to the Council's own activities and estate, but also it includes a number of actions which benefit the wider borough. Progress against the plan is being monitored by the Sustainable Environment Strategy Steering Group, which is chaired by the portfolio holder for Environment and Recycling. Of course, there are financial and resource implications associated with the implementation of the action plan, and these will be different on an action-by-action basis, and they may require revenue or capital expenditure and investment. In some cases, an action may result in a saving too. Each of those actions will need to be considered on their balance of cost and benefit, and approval sought in each case in the context of our other competing financial pressures and return on investment. And finally, the strategy recognises that we need to work with our partners to be able to deliver some of our aims and to enable and support others in delivering their priorities for change. The strategy therefore commits the Council to working closely with a range of partners, especially to raise awareness, engagement and behavioural change, and to protect and restore the natural environment. I hope members have found this quick run through of the strategy useful, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. So you've heard a brief summary. The purpose of the report is to consider the strategy and to make sure that we're happy that this is the Council's ambition, meets the Council's ambition to be an exemplar local authority. And we're looking for either views on this or the endorsement of it. So I'll hand over to members for questions or comment, please. Councillor Panther.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must admit, when I looked at it first over the weekend and again this morning, I think it was one of the most detailed and informative strategies that I've read for quite some time. Not trying to butter anyone up on that. The one comment I'll make, which is paragraph 211 on page 15, the target date of 2030, I don't think it's going to be at all practical. I think we're going to have to go with 2050. But apart from that, this is a very fine and clear strategy, and I would certainly recommend it.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Mr. Adams?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, at a previous meeting of your committee, you did discuss that matter and resolved to support the date of 2030 being the latest point at which the Council should achieve zero carbon emissions for its own activities, being distinct from supporting the date of 2050 as being the more realistic date for achieving carbon neutrality for the borough as a whole. Chair.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah, no, that's I concur with that. We did agree with that. Thank you. I've got two councillors wanting to speak. Councillor Cooper first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this. I think it's really important. I think it's great that we are considering that we, are an exemplar to others, and work to move things as swiftly as we can. I was wondering, as part of the education and engagement, whether that might include things like, I know, for example, within council, we've sort of looked at reducing the use of single-use plastics and things like that. But and it's commendable that we are now able to recycle plastic pots and trays and so on and so forth. But could we do further education with members of the public around the fact that plastic can only be recycled a number of times, and to think about other things as single use? So, for example, all the sort of bottles of various products that you buy throughout your house, they're all single use in effect as well. And there are alternatives that people can buy. And when we raise awareness like that, people start to vote with their pound. It can sort of change habits. And, if everybody started buying, let's say, a bamboo toothbrush, it might seem like one person's doing it, but it's that sort of cumulative effect. So if there's quite a number of people that start doing that, there's a lot less plastic for us to deal with as well as an authority. So I wonder if, something like that could be part of the education.
And are you requesting that more across the education and communication strategy?
Yeah, just if something like that could be included. Okay.
I mean, that can be noted, or do you want to comment on that, Mr. Adams?
No, thank you. No, I think that's quite a good proposal.
Okay, well, duly noted. Thank you. Councillor Chesky.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Mr. Adams, really. He mentioned the date of 2030, and I just wondered how confident he feels that 2030 is achievable. And if there are any doubts, what part of the strategy wouldn't be achievable by 2030? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Councillor. A difficult one to answer, clearly. 2030, less than 10 years away now for the borough to become neutral, and that means to have reduced its own carbon emissions down to such a point where they're either zero or the remaining emissions can be offset by other activities such as tree planting, is clearly going to be very challenging. And I mentioned earlier, we have an action plan that sets out a wide range of actions to work towards that target. But it will depend on a number of things. It will depend on how technology advances in the next decade. We hear in the press a lot of talk about alternatives to the internal combustion engine vehicles and hybrid cars or full electric, or even now hydrogen power. So it will depend on changing technology, and of course it will depend on that technology being affordable, because that is a major factor for the council. As I mentioned earlier, it does have competing pressures, although this is a very high priority for the council. So I think perhaps the previous member that mentioned education and awareness, I think that's going to be the key to this, really, affecting that behavioural change that we all need to make to achieve the ultimate aim. So I'm sorry that doesn't give a direct answer, but I think there's quite a range of factors that we will be working on and almost discovering as we move along over the next decade on this. Do
you want to come back, Councillor Chesky?
Yes, briefly, Chair. Just picking up really on what Mr. Adams said, and also Councillor Cooper previously about single-use plastics. And we kind of, I think, as a society, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, don't we? In terms of, you know, I can remember, in fact, we still have the milkman, for example. Well, you know, there's no plastic milk bottles to throw away, is there? Your bottles are recycled, reused many, many times over. And that's the same with, you know, soft drinks. Soft drinks were in glass bottles that were reused and reused. And I think we just need to take a look at some of the good things that used to happen. We look into mainland Europe as well, where there's an encouragement for members of the public to take their empty bottles back, and there's a recycling provision in the supermarket, and they get credited for it, don't they, financially, in terms of for the amount of glass that they recycle. So I think really those are a number of points that would contribute to this. It's not something we can do, of course, in Newcastle on its own, other than encouraging people to buy items that are in recyclable containers. And that probably fits in with the education element, doesn't it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comment, Mr. Adams?
No, thank you. All agreed and noted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Panch, you've still got your hand raised. Is that
No? No.
Okay, can you remove? That's it. Great, thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? Can't see anybody. You know, just from my perspective, I think this is an ambitious plan, and quite right. It needs to be ambitious because we as a borough need to be leading the way. And, you know, on the back of that, giving our residents every opportunity to follow, and every encouragement through what's already been mentioned in the education, the communications, and that's key for us being successful. So, you know, I think we do need to regularly review this and probably bring it back twice a year, I would suggest, so that we can monitor progress.
All right, I've got sound.
I think we've got Councillor Reg with us now.
20 minutes later.
Better late than never, Marion.
So the recommendation is that the committee considers, comments on and endorses the sustainable environment strategy. Are we all content to acknowledge that and accept it?
You are.
Okay, that is done. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Many thanks.
I think it was still the last meeting.
Okay, so we move on to item 6, which is town investment plans for Kidsgrove and Newcastle. And this is being presented by Mr. Kennedy, who is just about
as we speak. Thanks, Chair. I'll just share my screen with you, if that's all right, because I've got a short presentation.
Got some good news for us.
I certainly have got some good news.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do I start from the beginning? Let's do that. There we go. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to do future high street funding and town deal funding, because that's the way we've done it in the past, if that's all right, Chair. So just a very quick update on the future high street funding. It was announced at Christmas time that we had been awarded 11 million. We had applied for just over 17 million, but we got confirmation during the Christmas break that we'd been allocated 11 million. In the January, by the end of January, we had to submit back to government, MHCLG, how we were going to reallocate that 11 million from the ask that we'd submitted previous in late last year, and how we would use the 11 million for the schemes that we were either going to reduce in size or which schemes we were going to remove. So we decided that the Midway car park demolition and public realm improvements could be removed in the terms of the car park and reduced for public improvements to fit the 11 million funding envelope to maintain the works that we saw as a priority for the Rycroft site. So that was the demolition of the Civic Centre, new multi-storey car park, work at York Place, etc., as we have previously discussed. So that got submitted to government. We were one of the first councils to get back to the government to confirm how we wanted to reallocate the money, which meant that we were first in the queue. We were told in February that we would hear by the end of February that we would that they would acknowledge and accept and agree that £11 million split, and we were hopeful that that would happen. End of February came and went. We thought, right, it'll be in the budget. That came and went. Now we've been told it's next week. So we're very, they've made some announcements about Town Deal, which I'll talk about in the past. And on the back of that, we've asked them about future high street, and they are confident that we will hear that we have been successful with our reallocated £11 million split of projects that they are happy with, and they will then, they have told us, release the money to us. And the way that they've done, the Future High Street has done it very differently to the Town Deal, which I'll come on to in a minute, but we've spent the last 15 months working up detailed business cases, which are Green Book compliant. So you look at the capital costs, the running costs, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So all they need to do now is just confirm that they're happy with that split, and that is the last thing they need to do to confirm that we've got the grant, and that from all intents and purposes as it is, then they issue us an award letter and the money gets sent across to us. So in preparation for that, and because we are keen to get going, because we've been waiting a while, we're working up the contract to demolish the Civic building. So as soon as we get the money, we can award that contract, and that building will be demolished by the end of the year, early next year, hopefully, which means that we can then start with the exciting plans that we've got for Rycroft and the town centre. So that's Future High Street. If I just quickly flip on to Kidsgrove Town Deal, that's where we've got some more exciting news, because in the budget, which you can see on the fourth point, it was announced that our £25 million bid was accepted at 16.9, and that's been allocated to the Town Deal Board. We have been issued. Sorry, is somebody talking?
Yeah, it's myself. It's the chair.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just thought we're best taking these individuals to give
okay, that's fine. I'll go back up.
Chance to ask questions.
We can't see who's asking questions, so if you want to direct, Chair, that's fine.
No, neither can I.
Ah, okay.
Just a moment, and I will be able to. There we go. Okay, so on the Future High Streets funds, does anybody have any questions or comments on this before we move on to the Town Deal? Can't see anybody raising their hand, so I've got two. One is we've gone from 17 million down to 11.
Yep.
And that was that an allocation proportional across England, or was it specific reasons behind it, please?
The bid was oversubscribed, and government applied a 69% allocation to all bids. So, we were told. So there was no, we didn't fail on anything. There wasn't enough money for what to cover all of the asks. So they top sliced everybody, and everybody got 69% of their ask. Okay,
thank you. So we were evenly treated. That's the main thing.
Yes, yeah.
And second question was, how did we reach the decision to remove the midway and some of the public improvements?
When you looked at the original bid of 17 million, what we had influence to, what were our priorities and how we could influence them. So, for example, unlocking Rycroft, that was determined by the demolition of the Civic buildings, and that has a certain cost. So reducing cost on that wouldn't actually get you the outputs of the removed building, for example. So that was a given. The car park reprovision, that you can't deliver half a car park. So again, that was a provision. So it came down to, what do we need to start to bring the change, and what can we afford to do in a different way? So public realm improvements can be dealt with through different funding streams other than the high street. So if we are, you know, getting new planning permissions in, and we've got SIL in a place, or we can use the section 106 monies to do that type of thing in the town centre. but also the Midway car park demolition could come as a commercial investment that the council might wish to make, or in association with another partner. So that was easily identifiable as being able to be split away from the Rycroft, which was always the main focus of the High Street bid.
Okay, thank you. And just finally on this, I know we're waiting on final government confirmation, but as soon as we get that, have we got a time plan ready to go?
Yes, as I say, the Civic Centre demolition award will start within 2 to 3 months. We've already got the planning sorted on that. The contractors are being lined up to start the work, etc. They've been in there doing surveys of asbestos, and there's a bomb shelter down there that needs sorting out, and then we'll work with our partners, Aspire, to talk about how they want to develop out their residential units and their HQ building. They've already got some designs ongoing that they're working on in the background, etc. So we've got quite a keen idea of that we'll be starting construction works probably in 22. If we use this year, the remainder of this year, to work on the demolition and the planning applications for 1 or 2 of the things that are going on, the money has to be spent by 23. So we've got a very clear timescale of when we need to be moving on with. But we're eager and waiting to go. We just need to press the button.
Right, thank you. I've not seen any hands gone up, so fine to carry on with the town deal bit, and we'll do both of those before we go to questions. Thank you. Okay,
so first off, the town deal, as you know, that was the first town deal to be submitted to MHCLG just before Christmas, and it was announced on the 3rd of March in the budget that we've been allocated 16.9 million, which is a huge amount of money for Kidsgrove in particular. We had asked for 25, but there was an assessment done by government, and that reduced the amount to 16.9, which is fine. We're still very happy with that. And as I said previously, with the future High Street, the town deal is different. They've done it differently in that we have submitted strategic cases into government. They've assessed them quickly and said that we're happy to support you in building up bids up to 16.9. Here are the heads of terms that we want you to work to. So we have a town deal board meeting on Monday afternoon, which they will be asked to agree if they will accept the 16.9, and if they do, we confirm that back to government by the 24th. And actually we've brought it back from the 27th of May. We've then up until start again. Next week we agree how much, if they accept the 16.9, and then we've got 2 months to get back to government to say this is how we're going to reallocate the funds. So we don't have to do that immediately, although we will try and do it as quickly as we can, because there's a process to go through. Once we've confirmed the reallocation of the funds for the various projects, we then need to work up what they call Green Book compliant business cases, which is what we had to do with Future High Street before we submitted our bid. Town deal, they're asking us to do it after we've submitted the bid, but we don't actually submit the Green Book. We just get our Section 151 officer to confirm that she's happy with the assessment, and then government release that on a project by project basis, and we've got 12 months for that. So on Monday we'll be talking with the town deal board how we want to split that money and reallocate it. Will some schemes be removed? Will some schemes be reduced in support? And where will the extra money come from? What match funding can we get, etc., etc. So great news for Kidsgrove. It's the first actual confirmation that we've got money through, which is really exciting. So we're very, very happy with that. And then Newcastle, that was submitted later. As you know, we wanted to find, if you remember from previous presentations, we wanted to wait until we had heard about the Future High Street Fund to see whether we needed to backfill any of that money with the Newcastle town deal. We didn't need to in the end, even though we removed the car park, etc. We had some really good schemes that were considered worthy of consideration within the Newcastle town deal application. So we had a few questions come back from us in January, which were submitted at early March, and we're waiting for an announcement in late spring, early summer. Both bids, or both town deal boards, are we've put a request into government for some additional resource to work up these business cases, because we don't have that capacity in-house, and it was it must have been raised by several authorities because there was an application form and notice that came out from government to each of the local authorities that were bidding for the town deal that says, look, now you've got your town deal agreed. There is still a further 12 months of support that you might need from external consultants to work up the economics and the financials around this. So we're offering you to bid in for some money to help. And as with everything, we've heard that that was oversubscribed, but we did put a healthy bid in. So we'll see what money we get back, which will help us work up these assessments so that government can release the money for us over the next 12 months. So Newcastle is running 3 to 4 months behind Kidsgrove, but given that we've been successful, we did actually have a conversation with the minister on Monday around Kidsgrove and what the next steps were and stuff, and he congratulated us on the strength of the bid, but also praised us for the timeliness and everything, and reminded us that per capita, as he said, Kidsgrove has got more than anybody else in the country just because of the size of the town and the size of the grants. So whilst we might see others around us who got more money than us, they're for much larger areas. So we think we're starting to punch above our weight in terms of what we're asking for and what we're getting. Now the trick is to deliver it, because we've got the money, and the confidence has been given to us that we need to show that we're good for it, and we can spend it appropriately and in line with our aspirations that they agreed to. I'll stop there, Chair, if you want to, and I can go on to the town deal advance funding later, which is coming to an end. But as you said, the 2 town deals.
Yeah, it's just difficult to catch everybody with you sharing the screen.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I'm sharing. Great, thank you. I mean, great news there across those. So already we've been pretty much granted 28 million between the 2, and we put an application in for a further 25.
Yes.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
So across to members, any observations, questions, points of clarifications on what Mr. McKenny's presented, please?
I bored them to death, Gary. I'm sorry.
Such a good job.
They're saying, oh, don't make him stop. We do this all the time.
Yeah. No, that's fine then. So let's move on to your last item, please.
Okay, so if this is the last, oh, why isn't that working? There we go. You might remember, Chair and Committee, that we got 1.75 million in advance of the town deals being given to us, which was awarded to us last August, and we had till the end of March this year to spend that 1.75, 1 million in Newcastle and 750 in Kidsgrove. So we were funding the likes of the 3G pitch, the works of the sports centre in Kidsgrove, and work in Clough Hall Park and Newchapel Recreation Ground. And we were doing work in the town centre and in Nutton, purchasing the PCT building that was on the crossroads there that's closed, a new employment and skills hub in Lancaster building. We contributed to the demolition of the Zanzibar because that is a residential site that needed a little bit of help, and we'll be investing in that as a council as well. And I am happy to say that the last contract for all of these packages will be awarded, start on site on the 15th of March. So that's next Monday. So that means that the vast majority of this money will be spent by the end of March, and government have allowed us to switch budgets, I think they call it, where we're allowed to show spend on other projects, but use this money to pay for those other projects. So when the one or two of these schemes that slip into April, we can fund from that other pot of money. But it does show government that we have spent 1.75 million, which we think is a huge tick in the box to show them that whilst we are asking for big money, we're also able to spend it within their timescales and get the outputs they want, because you know, they're very happy to give money, but if you're not spending it, they're going to have an issue, because somebody else will be crawling all over them saying, why didn't we get it? We could have spent it, etc. And we think that this was a good test for us to show them that, you know, whilst we're asking for big money for Kidsgrove and Newcastle and the future High Street, we're set up to spend, and you know, we don't have a problem getting putting our money where our mouth is, etc. So confident that that will all be reported back to government, that we've spent the 1.75 million by the end of the month. And any questions on that, Chair, if I stop sharing?
Thank you. Was that 1.75 in addition to
yes,
what's already been granted?
Yes,
so
it was.
We're almost at 30 million now.
Yes, which is a huge amount of money to be invested into the Borough of Newcastle, and I don't think we've seen anything quite like that before, but we're certainly going to make a difference with it, that's for sure. Absolutely.
30 million is brilliant, and fingers crossed on the rest. Any questions or observations, members? Hunter?
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair. Regarding the e-scooter trial, is there any feedback yet on the possible success of this scheme?
Yes, Councillor, that we've got Swings, a company called Swings, doing our trial in Newcastle, and they are happy with the take up of the e-scooters, and it is in line with their aspirations before they started the trial. They are now deploying more scooters across the north of the town centre, so we can get more people into the employment zones, and they're starting to think about how they might. One of the things that they fed back on is that people won't or don't particularly want to walk to where the station. The bikes, the scooters are deployed, these little stations they call them. So they're working out a situation where you might be able to rent one of these scooters, rather than hire it per ride. You could rent it for a week or for a month, etc. And as the weather's getting better, they're seeing more and more take up of the rides, and less antisocial behaviour on them, and more for commuting to and from work, etc., because they can track if a scooter is on its way at 8 o'clock till 8:30, and then that's to a particular location, and then it goes back to another location 5:30, 5 o'clock, etc. So we're starting to see some an increase in the uptake, but they are genuinely happy with the way it's going at the moment.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Just one last question from me. In all of these projects, which is totaling a significant amount of money, are there any obstacles or anything that is worrying you in terms of a timely delivery of them by us?
No, we've got the governance set up around it, so we've got the right people around the right table making the decisions. We've got the right stakeholders and partners around the table, and we are already planned. We've not stood still and waited for the awards to be made. We have been working through plans and programs, etc., as if we already had the money in the bank, so we're not wasting time. And I've written job descriptions for some new project management support that will obviously need to come in and deliver these types of things, because the team just isn't big. In the particular team that run this or will be running this just aren't strong enough in terms of capacity, experience, and also days in the office, if I'm honest. So we are working up job descriptions so we can actually get more people involved and bring in outside expertise, but also then train the people that are in the council. So then when the idea is, this is priming more investment from other sectors, private sector, other, so then we've got a capacity and a program of work that's being driven through.
Great, good to hear. Thank you. Keep the exciting news coming, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. McKenny. Right, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the last substantive item on the agenda. And this is the move from a joint local plan to a borough local plan. Substantive is going to be given to us by Mr. Fleet, but portfolio holder, Councillor Northcott's going to introduce it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Basically, councillors, thank you very much for coming tonight, and welcome to the presentation. Before I hand over to the Head of Planning, Sean Fleet, just a quick background and purpose of this report was to update members here, and particularly yourself, Chair, that asked the question for this to come to scrutiny, was to update members on the decision to leave the joint local plan with Stoke-on-Trent City Council and to go our own way on the borough local plan. Just by way of a little bit of background, 2 major reports came through in terms of the Cabinet, both on the 9th of December and the 13th of January. The first one being to scope out reasons and rationale behind the possibility of going our own way. During that procedure, it was quite evident that there was significant differences in the 2 authorities. For example, the neighbourhood development plans that the borough had going and is having going at the moment was quite significant in terms of underpinning the planning process, and this wasn't reflected in the joint local plan at the time. This is something that's been coming down from government now for boroughs and districts to be agile to the neighbourhood development plans, to see that the housing figures are appropriate and development is appropriate for that particular area, and to give communities that chance to have the say in terms of shaping their communities from the very start. So that was immediately apparent when we did the scoping exercise. Whilst we've been doing work on the joint local plan since 2016, there have been numerous stalling blocks to this, and work was progressing very slowly to the extent that information was becoming out of date. The danger was that by the time we got to the end of the plan, the information perhaps wouldn't have been as robust as we would have liked it to be a true representation of the Newcastle Borough Council for the next 15 years. So the Cabinet made the decision in the 13th of January for the borough to go its own way in terms of a local plan. And I'll hand you over now to our Head of Planning, Sean Fleet, to update you on the work that we've done in terms of commencing work on the new borough local plan. Thank you. If there's any questions at the end, I'll be too pleased to try and answer those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Northcott. Over to you, Mr. Fleet.
Thank you, Chairman. No, as Councillor Northcott said, it's a thorough introduction there into the plan process, and I think one of the key words that comes out of this is agility. Working with Stoke-on-Trent had its merits. We both share common interests, particularly around things like housing and employment markets. But at the end of the day, we do have different issues as well, like HS2 has a greater impact on this borough, and the need to integrate neighbourhood planning is very important to us as well. And whilst we had spent a period of time working with Stoke on the joint local plan, it was becoming more apparent that those issues needed to be recognised by the borough and within the plan that works for the borough. And then over that sort of December-January period, the pair of reports were presented to Cabinet and the sort of merits of the case were put forward. In that sort of Christmas period, we did undertake some survey work in terms of contacting the public. We got web responses. We contacted key consultees and our neighbouring councils. And we also got independent advice on the process. So
through that, we were very pleased to see, even over that sort of winter period, we got 265 people coming back on that survey period. And the overwhelming sort of feedback of sort of 85% of the people there were sort of keen to see the authority stand on its own 2 feet, deliver a borough plan and work in that direction. So as officers, we've been looking at the timetables for that. Can it be done? And a key target for us is the government's deadline of December 2023 in terms of trying to get an adopted plan in place. Through the work with Lichfields, the national consultancy and others, we have looked at what needs to be done. And there is an element of taking one step back from where we got to with the joint local plan, but it's a belief that actually resetting that path and actually heading on to a sort of plan timetable that works for us, we can have a greater amount of confidence that we will actually hit the government's deadline in December 2023. Key stages in that sort of path are going to be around the sort of issues and options. It's a part of the plan that was done for the joint plan, but we need to check that for the borough, those issues are still pertinent, and where do the public here see those opportunities to deliver development as we move forward, and what sort of growth scenarios are they looking at? What do they think are the main settlements in terms of the rural and the sort of relationship with the urban areas? And that will be a piece of work we're looking to do in the autumn of this year, with the intention then, as we go in sort of 12 months later, to put forward the actual draft plan. So in sort of September 2022, we will be looking to publish a plan that will be identifying sites and looking at those detailed policies for people to work around, with the intention over the next year to pick up on the comments made to that plan, go to examination and hit the adoption target that the government wants. So that's partly, it's that confidence to achieve that goal is why we've actually stepped away from that historical work that's been done on the joint plan, and why we've sort of reset the agenda to deliver the borough plan in its place. And we think as well, not only is it going to sort of pick up on the likes of HS2 and the neighbourhood plan, but being our plan, it also allows us that agility to pick up on some of these emerging agendas that Dave Adams mentions about the sort of carbon neutral. How does this authority deliver on those policies that we can actually sort of make work for our development schemes, our sites and everything else? And also the sort of quite dynamic work that's coming through with the future high streets, those big initiative projects in sort of Kidsgrove and Newcastle. The plan can hook into that more effectively. So there's the sort of benefits come out of that. There is a resourcing element out of this. We are losing some of those skill sets that Stoke had, but in the same time, putting in that resourcing, this is something Cabinet have committed to in terms of bringing in some extra staff in terms of principal planning officers. We've already seen a sort of a new member of staff join Gemma's team in the policy team, and we have sort of structures in there to monitor the plan, timetable it out and look at those key projects that are coming in. So in terms of people, finance, actual time project management, we believe we've got a close resourcing system that we can actually keep a close touch on. We think in terms of the timing, it works well. We think this is actually something with that shorter timescale, that sort of must get to December 23 target. It's suddenly sort of reinvigorated and given us a lot of drive to go through that process. And I think there are a lot of benefits that will come through on that process. I think one of the concerns many people sort of flagged up early on was some of that, if we're losing all of that evidence back from the previous joint plan. Fortunately, a lot of that work was structured in terms of being for both authorities, and some of the studies have distinct Newcastle chapters, Stoke chapters, and it's relatively easy to pick some of that information out. Some of the others are a little bit more entwined, and we will need to do an update to them. But the actual amount of material that we can carry over from the joint plan into the borough plan is quite substantial, and certainly helps us accelerate that timeline for the issues and options this year. I think as well, it's with COVID and the possibility, I don't know if Brexit's yet going to have much impact on us. COVID certainly does. We're going to have to review a lot of that evidence anyway as we go through the next couple of years to make sure that we're looking at any of those impacts and opportunities that have come, particularly from 2020 and the last couple of months. But we have a programme, and I think we can deliver that plan for the borough in the timeline expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fleet. There's been quite a substantive report pre-circed on this, and also 2 cabinet reports which members have had access to. I've got a couple of observations and questions, but before I make those, I'll hand over to members first of all, please. So open the floor up. Councillor Panther.
Yeah, thank you. I find it largely encouraging that not only the residents strongly favour this borough local plan, but the consultants Litchfield point out that it is quite capable of being delivered within the required time frame. I think that's very encouraging.
Thank you. Anything else from other members? No, not seeing anything. Okay, so just a couple of things from myself. I mean, I don't think I've made any secrets of the fact that I've been concerned by this decision, if I'm being honest. Not so much in the fact that we've gone to our own local plan, because I think that probably should have been done in the first place, but more from the fact that we have spent over 5 years, if not more, on a JLP, and really how much of that now has been wasted, both from a content point of view, but also a financial point of view, and how much of it are we having to reinitiate, reinvigorate, repeat and update in starting the process over again. So I suppose that would be my first set of questions, please.
Thank you. No, I mean, in terms of the evidence base, it is the asset of the whole process, and it underpins a lot of the future decision making. Having that strong, up-to-date, detailed evidence base is paramount to the work we're doing. I'm aware that as the plan was progressing over the last sort of 7 years, though, at the joint local plan, some of that initial evidence that was at the kickstart stage of that in itself had started to sort of become a bit sort of long in the tooth. And we went through a process last year, particularly, of updating all of that evidence with a revised end date of 2037, because the plan had sort of started to slip that much that we were starting to see a process of reviewing the evidence again before we'd even got to the start line of the main consultation on the plan. I think by taking control of that, yes, we're going to have to sort of make sure that some of those documents are separated and appropriate. But I think it's actually, we will have that timeline, and we can make sure that that evidence that has been accrued can be used effectively. It is that resource management process that we won't see any further slippage in that plan material.
And in relation to the actual, you know, how much can we use, how much has been wasted, what about the financial implications?
Yeah, there are implications in terms of that, and I think things like the employment and housing studies particularly is the core backbone of some of that evidence base. But with COVID coming through as well, I think that would have always needed updating. What we have from the JLP is sufficient to take us through the issues and strategic options that we're looking to do this autumn. So that will be able to set big picture. As we get through into the middle of next year, we will update that and do a partial review of that evidence to make sure that we can actually reflect back on possibly 12 months of post-COVID economy and see what that means, particularly for things like home working. Is the model of this, what we're doing now, going to be sort of carried out in full or in part or not at all in 2023 and onwards? And how does that affect high streets and other sort of main ways of working? These are unknowns that in terms of floor space, demands on the towns and the villages in the borough are we're hearing commentary, but it's all speculation at the moment. It's evidence of what has happened that we want to look back on. So that's where we will have to invest to actually ensure that the plan is delivered in a strong manner. And the key test will come at that examination stage in 2023, when the inspector will ask us to prove that the plan is what is technically known as sound. And that test of soundness will be looking at the evidence. Does it reflect on what the market is, how the environment is, our social infrastructure, and can it be reflective of where the borough's going in the future?
I think also for me, there's the significant things that got to be borne in mind here. We pressed the pause button before we're about to undertake the major spend in terms of the final stages of the joint local plan. I mean, if you'll see on the report there, a lot of the percentage of officer time is dedicated to the development of the plan. To go ahead and risk a possible plan, I mean, it wasn't given that the inspectorate would be accepting the joint local plan, bearing in mind the changes that were going to happen. And then we would have been faced with producing another local plan, which would have incurred more costs because the evidence wasn't robust. But now this is an opportunity for us to make sure that the planning department is strengthened. So once we've worked through the local plan, that the reviews and the changes necessary will be in place, because the officer expertise will be in place to meet those demands. But a lot of the costs in terms of actual time is the major factor here, officer time that we've dedicated to this. So in some respects, risking to go ahead for the next 15 years without the thoroughness of a proper local plan, I think would have been money wasted in terms of, so we're in effect, we're spending to save, because we're having a plan that's tailor-met for Newcastle, the needs of Newcastle, be more closely reflected to the needs of Newcastle. And that will be that more robust in terms of challenge and going forward. So I think that it shouldn't be underestimated that the money that's going to be spent on this, A, would have been factored in anyway. 2, possibly we would be faced with a rerun of the local plan should it have failed at examination because of the things that have been identified, the problems that the head of planning just outlined. But going forward, we've got that expectation of the planning department that's fully robust and in tune with the needs of Newcastle, and is capable of taking that plan not just to examination, but for the subsequent revisions and the work necessary around that to make sure that the work is applicable to Newcastle. So I think it's money well spent, Chair, and I think, you know, it's a golden opportunity to make sure that the neighbourhood development plans are brought into fruition, and we've got a far better snapshot of what is needed in Newcastle. So I think, personally, I think the money's well spent, or will be spent. Thank you.
Thank you. That leads on to my final 2 questions, actually, some of the points that you've raised. And one was, are there any implications at all in moving to this on the neighbourhood development plans that are already very much, you know, coming through to fruition, and regulation 16 through to submission?
Absolutely. Before I let Sean go on that, they're going to be snapshots of what is required at the local level. So the ones that have been already done and adopted, they'll be there. The evidence there in place. They will need to go through the re-evaluation stage once their plan's been adopted for so long. But the ones that are coming through will be a representation of what's required. The only slight adjustment is that the neighbourhood plans may need some to make sure that they've validated growth in their area where it's needed appropriate growth, and gone for a slight growth rather than saying we're not going to accept any growth whatsoever. That's where we need to be careful, because of if that's adopted on those sort of lines, then it does actually leave us open to development challenge from developers, because we haven't prescribed any growth whatsoever. So that's the only caveat. But the ones that have been done before, the ones that are coming through, and the ones that are going to be done ahead of that are going to be valuable contributions. So it's when they are online, they're going to be part of the dovetailing process to inform the local policies. So they're vital for the formation of the local plan, in my view.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to add anything to that, Mr. Fleet?
It is that word dovetailing is the key one, to make sure, because it is the borough plan, we have the opportunity to make sure neighbourhood and borough work much more closer in terms of shaping those communities.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. And finally, and this is a topic that we've approached a number of times before, probably prior to you starting, Mr. Fleet, but we've always struggled to attract talent with planning officers and bring them into the department. And it's been a regular issue that we've never had enough resource within planning. This obviously requires more resource. What's your current view on being able to attract that talent?
Okay, we went out for advertisement a few weeks ago, a few months ago, for a junior post, which was already within the structure. I'm pleased to say that the candidates that came for interview, we had some very strong candidates in that, and we've now appointed, and one of those people have started. But I think what we're able to present as well is a very sort of forward-looking council. We have a very clear vision of what we want to deliver out of this, when and what people can do to help shape the borough, and what for them their role in this process. And I think getting that message out is very useful, and I'm hoping that as we now close off the advertisements and those posts, I worked with HR yesterday on one of the bits, that actually we can get the right people in to shape that, and I'm fairly confident that we will get good candidates in. So yes.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Thank you.
And Chair, just a little comment from myself. I'm sure Sean's far too modest to mention this, that we've got I think we've got a great planning team at the moment since Sean's joined us, and we've also got an excellent senior policy officer, Gemma March. I think our planning figures in terms of our performance will no doubt give that impression to applicants that we're a forward-moving council, and that we're a good planning authority. I think will, strengthen the case in terms of people wanting to come and work for the borough. I think had it not been the case, I think it wouldn't have been quite an attractive package. But there's obviously a clear strategy there. There's been many changes in terms of the executive as well, which has underpinned the improvements of the council. And I think we're in a great position now to attract candidates, and I just hope that's reflected in the numbers that are applying for these posts, and ultimately quality of the applicants that apply. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And you've got it on record now, Mr. Fleet, for your end of year review.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Simon's still here as well, I noticed. That's good.
He is. Okay, so anything else from members before we move on? No. Okay, so the recommendation is that Cabinet considers the information provided from us and the option of commencing work on the borough local plan for Newcastle-under-Lyme. Are we all content? Right, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fleet.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor. Okay, so we now move on to item 9, which is the work programme. Unless anybody has anything to raise now, then as usual, please email it into myself if you want anything incorporated. Item 10 is public question time. I've not been made aware of any questions that have come in from the public. And item 11 is urgent business. And we do have one item of urgent business this evening. And that is in relation to the task and finish group for Wally's Quarry. So as you're aware, there's been a special council meeting called for next Thursday on the back of considerable public interest in the odours that are emanating in the area. And as a result of that, then the task and finish group output will need to be considered by council. Now, normal process is that that would be brought to us as a committee first before it would go to council. We're not able to do that given the timing of the special meeting. And so I need your authority to proceed on that basis, please. Are we all happy to take the report directly to main?
Indeed.
Good. Okay, in that case then, I'm happy to close the meeting and thank you for your participation this evening.
And 1 minute earlier than last time.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Ciao.